So, Knight and Everett seem to kind of be in cahoots, hating on Chomsky and trying to justify why he even rose to such fame. What the disagreement is really about is the existence of universal grammar. So Chomsky believes that language is intuition, that we're born with an innate capability for language, or the basic software for language. The software is installed in every human. It's called grammar. Chomsky also believes that knowledge of recursive syntax cannot be explained, and that language should not arise from anything social. Knight is disagreeing with Chomsky, and then in turn, Everett is disagreeing even more adamantly. They both consider the social aspect of language that Chomsky leaves out. So Chomsky's theory of universal grammar is represented by the syntax trees that we talked about in class. Syntax trees are a visual representation of our mental language processes. I think Chomsky would agree that we don't actually have trees in our heads, and that that's actually the way we produce language, but that is kind of what his universal grammar is like. It's like one of those syntax trees that we were talking about. They're comparable to the language software that Chomsky talks about. A couple problems that I thought of is that, first of all, trees, software, both of them, they aren't creative. They both have strict rules. And language is creative. We can produce language, such as the first article, the other article, not this one, the other article talked about unique syntax. We can produce things like that don't go with a tree and that go against the software. So we can create our own syntax that doesn't fit. Also, software cannot be built upon. It's there to stay. Well, I mean, it can be built upon, like things can build on top of it, but the software itself does not change. Trees also, they can get bigger and longer, but they both, well, software and trees still stick to the same rules. But language evolves. Language can completely change. It's changed. It's created new language from one language to another. Software does not create other softwares. So in class, the question that we talked about was, is syntax psychologically real? So are those trees psychologically real? Are we thinking about these trees? This is the same question that Knight and Everett are exploring when they're questioning Chomsky's universal grammar. Is universal grammar real? It's probably not, in the same way that we don't think about these trees. It doesn't seem as though anybody actually knows, if there are no trees, if there's no universal grammar, what is in our head? What are we actually thinking about? Even Everett and Knight are not really sure about that, but they know that it is more cultural than Chomsky thinks. Everett brings up a few good points to oppose universal grammar. One of my favorite one that I found was that some human languages use linear grammars. They avoid embedding, but they still work to communicate. Everett also brings up the importance of symbol, which has, since the beginning of language, been expanded upon by social interactions. So Chomsky may think that we have a universal grammar because languages tend to work all in the same way. All languages have verbs and nouns and adjectives. They can all be represented by these trees. So why can't they all be represented by this universal grammar? But really, it's probably just because most humans are trying to communicate the same messages. We all live in the same world. We all are composed of the same thing. We all have two arms, two legs, well, with some exceptions. We all live in the same world and we're trying to get across the same points. We have the same needs. And that's why social interaction is probably more influential than a universal grammar.